about has really been on my heart. So I'm glad you brothers have agreed to come and chat with us. Dr. Eric Mason, Dr. Bobby Manning, tell us your ministry, Eric.
Well, first off, I'm glad to be here. Thank you, Pastor Lou, Pastor Thabiti, and Pastor Tony for putting this on. Let's give God a hand praise to them for putting this on. Thank you for putting this on. Thank you guys for leadership at the front porch. Eric Mason Epiphany Fellowship, husband of one wife, 4 kids, ready to go to glory. That's it.
That's a lot of pressure not to say nothing long now. This is Bobby Manning, pastor of First Baptist Church of District Heights, Maryland, DMV in the house. Husband of one wife, 3 kids, 3 boys.
3 boys.
3 boys.
Eric, can you have
3 boys and a girl. She's last.
She's, oh my goodness.
And we swole.
Oh my goodness. Now look, Eric, I'm old, right? So a lot of things you say, man, I don't know what you're talking about, right? I don't know the lingo, so you got to help me out, all right? You got to break it down with some parentheses or something. Help the old man, okay? Okay, you got me? Okay.
I think he meant tetelestai. It's finished.
It's
ain't
finished.
No more coming after that.
Okay, gotcha. That I understand. Saving Our Sons, that's the name, the title for this discussion. We kind of borrowed from your book. Both these gentlemen are authors. And they've both written on this subject. Hold the mic up. I thought you were saying, go ahead, brother. You were saying, go ahead and hold that mic up, right? Manhood Restored, Saving Our Sons, and you both have written passionately about the importance of engaging men, young men, and seeing those men through just to know the Lord and discipling them so that they will grow up and be men of God, serving the Lord, their church, their families, their communities. Saving our sons. Let me ask you guys a question regarding that. Is this a crisis critical moment for our men and our sons? Either way, yeah.
Absolutely, and I think it's a call to action for the church. I think it's at the end of the day, when you're talking about effectively engaging young men, it's a call to fatherhood. And so many of our young brothers, and I speak just specifically to our younger brothers, we need examples, we need fathers, we need mentors, and so that's what what started me on this journey is asking, because as a young man myself, I got sick of the church blaming us for why we weren't involved. And putting the onus on us, and giving certain excuses. Well, they're lazy. Well, they won't commit. Well, they won't get involved. And I didn't believe that. I couldn't roll with that because the gangs don't have any problem engaging us. Fraternities on the college campuses, everybody that's right. The fraternities don't have any problem engaging us. The Nation of Islam doesn't have any problem engaging us. So I just had to ask this question, well, what is it that they are doing, as someone who loves the church, but what is it that they are doing that the church is not, in order to engage our young men? And I found, y'all, that they're basically a bunch of biblical principles, things that Jesus did, that somewhere along the lines we dropped. And the world picked up and started doing better than us what God called us to do in engaging our young men.
What's your response, Eric?
Yeah, I think it's, Bobby did a great job kind of overviewing it. I would just add to it. I think one of the major challenges that we're dealing with is what Saving Our Sons represents means there's a lostness. And because there's a comprehensive lostness, I do agree with him that there's this lack of engagement. I'm a hip hop fan, so I'm on AR Ab's Instagram, and he put something up, and he put something up. He in Philly, that's my city. He grew up north of where our church is. He gets on there, and he has like 30 cats on the block with burners. They just spread out on the block. He said, "I go where nobody go." he just kept saying that in the camera. He said, talk to him. And then this one dude who's known as a murderer gets up in there, tats on his face, start talking crazy. And I'm just like, man, do we have the boldness to go on that little side street, because we got narrow streets in Philly, and where you have to park on the sidewalk halfway to get, somebody gonna sideswipe you in Jesus' name. And I'm just looking like, man, are we just having men's breakfasts? Or are we going to change and turn the rudder of the gospel ship towards the block? Yeah. And I'm hungry for that.
Okay.
And so when I look at this whole idea of saving our sons, like Bobby said, we could talk smack all day about who got the ear of who's culturally pastoring them. But the question is, we the ones got the truth, and we the most scared.
That's right.
So
what's up with that? Yeah, what's up with that? Yeah. I watched a video. It's on the website. Matt Chandler, he was moderating. A couple other brothers. Understanding racial reconciliation, something like that. Reconciliation in race. Well, I watched the video. I still don't understand it. Yeah, so I just want you to know that. But you did something I've never seen you do before, Dr. Mason. The brother had just talked about his boy and how he felt with what's been going on and being afraid for his son and being concerned in ways that he had really not been concerned before. Yeah. And Matt pushed it to you. And you kind of grabbed your head, you kind of wiped your eyes a little bit, and you said, I don't know what to say. I don't know. And I'm like, what? Say something. And you, what was happening, man, with that? You remember that moment, man?
Yeah, I remember that moment because I had become emotionally exhausted with my white evangelical brothers. Not hateful, not unbrothering them, right? We're brothers because of the blood of Christ. But I had gotten so frustrated with the lack of cultural empathy, lack of understanding of the narrative. To be honest, and Matt knows this, when I was on the panel, I didn't even want to be there. Because I was almost, in that season, I was extremely apathetic towards whether or not racial reconciliation conversation was actually even going to go anywhere. Because I feel like, man, I got to go back to the stuff you get to ignore. Mm-hmm. And I'm not talking about Pastor Matt, that's my man. So I'm just saying, like, y'all get to be apathetic. Like, I got to go deal with the school to prison pipeline. It's not a stat or a blog for me. Mm. We're in 6 schools. We got teachers, and we're ministers. So I don't get to talk about stats and theory and do a TED talk at some big convention. And I got to get out. I'm walking up to the facility, and I'm dealing with young bucks, teardrops in their eyes, real tatted teardrops, and I'm trying to talk to all of these different people groups. So for me, it's more than a book for me. Mm. Like Manhood Restored, I didn't write that until after 20 years of doing ministry among men. And so it wasn't like I'm looking to be on some type of come up.
Right.
That's not what it's about. It was actually about, like, we are trying to actually see systemic gospel change in the lives of people. We care about the middle, upper class. I just feel like the hood is so blasted, neglected. I just think it's neglected, and it's the very thing Paul says. Paul, after they had the gospel convo, and Paul went to, went down, he's talking to Galatians, he said, yeah, I went to the apostles, chopped it up with them. I'm hitting them, they hit me up with, what's your gospel? And he started telling them the gospel, and then they gave me the right hand of fellowship. And it's almost like when Paul writes that he has sort of like a chip on his shoulder. Like, he's like, man, I was like, y'all don't know, I was already gonna do that, right? Then he says something powerful. He says, and they told him not to forget about the poor and about those in prison. And he said, of which I was already going to do.
Gonna do that anyway.
So I think that's what the church already, like, our stamp needs to come after the street credibility of practically engaging what's needed on ground level from an incarnational perspective of bringing gospel change to places that nobody wants to go. But there's mad opportunity for gospel fruit if we just open our mouths and stop being fearful and get out there and engage these cats with the gospel.
But then also, if we're willing to kind of put some of our traditions to the side that keep us bound in our preferences, and so there are some. What I've learned is there are some who are scared to go at all. There are some who are bold enough to go, but too stupid to talk to young men. And I shouldn't say that's my son says we don't say stupid.
My wife said that too, Doc.
Okay, yeah. So
I'm allowed to say stupid.
I'm
allowed
not
to say stupid once every quarter.
Yeah, my 5-year-old tells me I can't say.
You done messed up
But
everything.
yeah, it's messed up everything. But I think a big part of it is also that ministering to young brothers is a different animal. And when you're talking about young millennials, if you don't understand, first of all, that young millennials come from a different perspective than our previous generations, and so if you need us to be you before you minister to us, it's not going to work. You might disqualify yourself from ministering to us, and so just understanding that our young brothers, our young people, first of all, before you get mad at us, just realize that you made us. And so we're products of who you are, and so the fact that I ain't going to dig into that. Let me. And so there are some certain needs that you might have to drop at the door. If you're going, for instance, let me give a couple of for instances here. Number one, for young men, you have to earn the right to speak into their lives. So a lot of my baby boomer brothers will ask me, you write a book, they ask you all kinds of questions, and they will ask me, well, how you get the young men to pull their pants up? And the response is, you got to care more about their heart than their pants, because at the end of the day, if they don't know you, then they're not. Okay. This generation, so in my first book, in Saving Our Sons, there's a chapter on one of the things that young men need and crave is leadership. Don't believe the hype that we don't like leadership. We crave leadership. It's just that we don't give respect away easily in this generation. In previous generations, there was a natural. My father taught me if there's a man that's one day older than you, you speak to him, you call him sir or madam, right? Sir or ma'am. But in this generation, this generation doesn't just give away respect. And the reason for that is because this generation has seen so many people misuse their platform, misuse their titles. My grandfather, every time he introduced me, he did, "This is Reverend Bobby Manning." I'm like, "Granddad, we at the Walmart. These people don't care that I'm a reverend." But for him, there's a natural, automatic respect attached to the title. It just comes with it. With this generation of young men, there's a natural skepticism attached to the title. And we just got to understand, it's not a good thing or a bad thing, it's just a thing. And the quicker we realize it, the quicker we understand that this respect is craved, but it's not given away. I don't expect you to be there for me, even though you said. As a matter of fact, I might be disrespectful to you for 6 months. Until I realize that you're willing, because the last 3 men who came in my life talk about, I want to be your mentor, only hung around for 6 weeks. And so there is a certain, I wouldn't call it a skill level as much as an understanding that you're ministering to a new generation, and don't disqualify yourself from ministering to us because you need something from us before you give something to us.
In light of that, they don't respect our manhood as a church. I don't know if the average man necessarily, when they think of church, thinks biblical masculinity. Or I can learn how to be a man from the men in the church. And so that's why you got the mystery cults. Again, this is wave number 5 or 6 for the last 100 years, since Noble Drew Ali. Okay, since Nation of Islam, since Marcus Garvey, since the 60s, which some of you brothers probably experienced, during the 60s and 70s. Then we had the wave in the late 80s, early 90s when many of us was in college and a different world was on, boom, and we all went to college, and then we left the church, and we all started putting Africa around our neck, X's on our hat, and going like Yak Al, you know, like that. And so now it's a whole brand spanking new season of unanswered theological questions that our churches haven't answered to give cultural identity to men, because a lot of people don't know that a part of masculinity development in our culture is cultural identity. And if you disconnect spirituality from cultural identity and don't define cultural identity, because you can't even define manhood for many guys until you define their cultural identity nowadays. And so because that's a huge thing, that's something we have to work through. In other words, brand, I hate using the word brand, but this is the best way to do it. We have to, as the church, brand that God, since God is the creator of manhood. This was his idea. It wasn't something that came through nurture, through human beings, through some type of emotional evolutionary process, gender came about. No, God created man and woman. And in light of that, it's God's idea, since he's the manufacturer of masculinity. Christ is the ultimate picture of masculinity in his incarnation and beyond. Then why in the world does the manufacturing factory of heaven, the church, not have a clear communicated and presentation of gospel manhood that cats can be like, yo, man, I want to be, I ain't trying to get him to wear a jersey. I'm not trying to get him to wear butter Timbs and skinny jeans. All I want him to do, because I think there's a misnomer with that. I remember we went out to the playground. It's a bunch of fathers. We got a playground beside the building. Went out to the playground. And the kids playing, and I was like, son, and you know, I'm husky with my sons. So I'm like, hey, you know?
Right.
And all the young bucks like turned. And then as I began interacting with, at the time, my two oldest, it almost felt like a strange thing to them. And so one of the things that I realized, man, is that, man, we got to have a ministry of presence. We have to have a ministry of presence, and we have to have a ministry of presence that translates masculinity, not beyond a deep voice and all of that type of stuff, but the presence of what does biblical manhood look like. And that's something that I want to be able to be like Jeremiah 29, dwell in the city, right? And so that's what I would love to see us as the church continue to work through on the solution side of things, to begin to say, how can we have a ministry of presence and a ministry of place in order to engage people to see biblical manhood?
But you said earlier, you said we can't be fearful. We can't be afraid to go, to engage. So it seems like you're saying, first of all, we go. Right?
Or create common ground experiences.
Create common ground experiences. Then you mentioned all the way back to Genesis. So there needs to be the right message. Because see, in your book, Eric, you said, he said, and this, hold the mic up. He didn't say that in his book. T is saying hold the mic up. You said we don't need, I think you did mention men's prayer breakfasts. We don't need programs. We don't need it. What we need is the gospel. As a matter of fact, it's the subtitle of your book. The gospel is what transforms or makes men into, makes a man a man. It is the gospel that restores manhood. Right. So what I'm finding difficult, and what I'm hearing, and when guys talk, the way you guys are talking, it seems to me that at some level, there is a discount of the sufficiency of the gospel. That we have an idea, we know, we understand the culture, we understand these young men, and we go to engage them, and we leave the gospel back at the church or at home. Absolutely. As if though the message of Christ, as if though Christ is not, you know, the ultimate man. As we have to add something to it. We have to do some kind of program, some kind of other thing, but not the gospel message. You pushed against that in your book.
Yeah, I guess I pushed against it because I don't want us to lose the way God transforms manhood, because we got to know the narrative: creation, fall, redemption. And so what many times we try to do what I would call pre-conversion discipleship. And so, which I understand there are different ideologies on that theologically, because I do think that there is a sense in which that can happen. But I think I don't think we prepare people for salvation by pull up your pants. Like I'll give you an example. So when the PIF first started, we had some interesting things that happened. So we had guys that ended up, coming through and becoming a part of the church, and God was blessing them. But they didn't take their hats off all the time. So they would be serving communion with their hat turned backwards. And I'll never forget, an old church mother came in there.
Oh, Lord. Oh, Lord, have mercy.
One dude was sort of sag. He was semi-sagging. Semi-sagging. The whole situation wasn't out. It was just the top of the brief.
It was the band. It was the band.
Dudes want to show their brief name. I don't understand that.
I don't get that either. I don't get
so,
that.
One dude got on the hoodie, and it's like, and you're like, so the rumor went out that Epiphany got people, they just pulling up off the street to share communion, but they don't know where that cat came from.
Right.
I said, if you'd have seen money like a year ago, this is like a great version of them without the clothing change. And so I think that we have to stop trying to make them culturally church ready.
Whatever that means.
Whatever that means.
Because
Because I think sometimes we're trying to make people culturally church ready, not sanctify their souls. And I think you get some of the other stuff that maybe, yes, we want guys to not show their behinds, right? We want that, but that comes through them showing their soul first.
That's right, yeah.
And as they show their soul, you begin to lock into them spiritually, engage them lovingly, and engage them with the renewing power of the gospel. And then there's a level of dignity. That's why I like Titus 2, because it tells the older men to be dignified. In other words, there's some stuff that's just, when you grow as a man, there's just some stuff that's below you.
Yes, right.
You know what I'm saying? That's why they only give one qualification for a young man: wisdom. If you make a young man wise, all that other stuff falls into place. Yeah. But then it gives all of these different things as an older, mature man, what wisdom looks like, practically laid out in a man's life when he has spiritual maturity in place. And those older men become the pictorial of spiritual maturity within the framework of the local church as they dispense gospel wisdom to them.
So then the old man does not have to become a young man to reach young men.
Absolutely.
Yeah. He just
that
needs
actually
to be
works
a
against him.
dignified older man.
It looks crazy.
Yeah, it looks
Yeah.
Like
looks foolish.
don't dress your age.
Sometimes I try to. Sometimes I try to, like my sons are grown, I try to relate and try to use their language, and they're like, Dad, nobody's saying that stuff no more, right?
Yeah, I did the name one time for my son, and I lost all credibility with him and everybody. Like, Dad, just
let it go. Let it go.
We used to live in Dallas, and I took Spanish class in high school. Got a strong C+ in Spanish class. So I thought one time I was engaging a strong C+. And so I tried to engage this brother speaking Spanish, but I knew I only knew like 7 words, but I found a way to string all 7 of those words together at one time.
Hold it.
And sound like I could speak Spanish.
Hold it, Bobby. Hold it. You knew 7 words.
Yeah.
That's not a C+. But go ahead.
I went to public school.
Go ahead.
So I go off in Spanish. I'm just playing. That was a joke. See, I'm gonna get an email after this.
That's right.
All my kids are in public school too. Right.
Bobby Manning at yahoo.com. Me and Eric didn't say that. We didn't say that. Come on, brother.
But so I go off in Spanish, and I felt real good about myself until he started talking back to me.
Oh, yeah.
And that's when I realized, like, yeah, un poquito. Like, I don't. And I realized I looked foolish to him trying to speak a language that I could not speak. But he could speak enough English to communicate to me. Sure. It would have just been in my better interest to allow that English allow our broken English to allow us to communicate, because I knew that he had something for me. The same is true with us as we try to pour into the generations behind us. We keep talking about millennials. We got a whole nother generation coming behind the millennials. We're still trying to figure out the millennials, not knowing that our generation is 13 years old already. But just understanding that that you don't have to speak my language or try to speak my language if you can't. I need you to speak the way you speak. Because I do recognize, whether or not I show you, I do recognize that you have something to give me. Acts 8 is one of my favorite passages to talk about. This young black man who's going back to his home in Ethiopia after having come from the temple to worship, a place where he had been kept at arm's length because of what he looked like. And now he's going this long journey back to Ethiopia. God catches Philip up and says, look, I need you. I know you just finished revival, but I need you to go have this one-person revival in the middle of the desert. And so Philip rose up on him and asked him this question: do you understand what you're reading? and I love this. This young black man got smart with him. How could I? If I don't have somebody. This dude on his way home from church and said to Philip, I don't have nobody to guide me. How could I? And so Philip could have been like, man, this smart aleck dude, God, you sent me to talk to this. I'm going back to Samaria where we just finished revival and I got respect. But no, he said, okay, well, let me come up and sit with you. And let me walk with you. This is a call to mentorship, a call to spiritual fatherhood, a call to investment past what he looks like and past what he says. We got to decide whether you want to save his behind or whether you want him to kiss yours, because neither one it's not, both is not going to happen. Mm-hmm. And so Philip was willing to sit with them. And my favorite part is this. I don't know how long Philip sat with him. I don't know how long Philip sat with him. What I know is at the end of the story, they found water. Wait a minute. They was in the desert. So God has done one of two things. Either he's dropped a river in the middle of the desert, which I'm cool with because he's God. He can do what he wants.
And it was a river.
It was a river.
Yeah, it was
a river. It wasn't
a lot of water.
Mirage. It was, yeah.
It was a lot of water for us Baptist boys. That's a lot of water.
That's a lot of water.
Yeah.
So either God dropped the river in the middle of the desert, or Philip stuck with him long enough to take him from a place of dryness to a place of
I'm about
life.
to speak in tongues.
Come on, bro. Come on, bro.
Please don't. Please.
But
Please. Please.
Man, now we're going to have another conference, man.
Will the ushers please come forward?
Is there one this morning?
Ushers.
Philip was willing to stick with him and get over those barriers and those hurdles that might have gone against the grain of his level of comfort, but he was willing to meet him, and he went up into the chariot and sat with him. And the text says, starting with this, back to the gospel, starting with this passage, he taught him about Jesus.
Yeah, it's good.
And so he modeled for us, I believe, what it looks like to minister to a young man who has been kept for way too long, been kept at arm's reach at the temple because he didn't look the part.
It didn't seem like Philip that he had to become an Ethiopian.
Not at all. Not at all.
Philip needed to be willing to go. He was commissioned to go.
Wow.
And Philip needed to know the text.
Mm-hmm.
He needed to know that Isaiah was not talking about himself, that he was talking about Christ.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
And so,
yes, sir.
Amen.
So we have just a minute left. Quick solutions. Now, I know that solutions are not quick, but some things people are saying, well, what can we do? What can we do? We have a minute. What can people do?
Yeah, I think two things. I think one of the most important passages to me on this type of stuff is Colossians 4:2-6. It's a big part of the matrix of how I think through it and how I think Paul is engaging us to think through it. I know it applies to everyone, but I'm just applying it because our conversation is saving our sons. Mm-hmm. He says, pray for the open door for the word.
That's what it says.
That's right. Which is amazing, which means that you're going to be around people where you're going to need open doors as you go, right? And then he says, act with wisdom towards outsiders. Let your words be seasoned as it were with salt in order that you may know how to respond to each person. I think you have to develop what I call common ground experiences. Right. Now, when I talk about these common ground experiences, you don't always want to be, like, we do something every month during the nice months. called Action Walk, where we get out on the block, we actually engage people. It's great. I believe in that old school stuff. We don't put on all orange and hats and go out and bullhorns. We don't do that. I mean, if you do that, praise the Lord for your ministry. We don't do that. But one of the things we do is we do that, but then we also develop other common ground experiences. So that our gospel conversation comes out of relationship versus just cold turkey all the time. Mm-hmm. And so we have a basketball league where we see 200 kids throughout the week, right? We have a separate youth group because in our church, you know, and this is for free, for those who say youth ministry shouldn't be done and everybody should just be together all the time, that's not translatable to every context. That's a whole nother thing. So anyway, I think that we do have two separate, because one of our youth groups is grimy. I mean, it's grimy. I mean, it's like 30-something dudes, and it's dudes, and all of them come from Muslim families, and their parents send them to the church. And we say, you know, we're going to talk to them about Jesus. And they're like, okay. Mm-hmm. And so they said, go. And so we get opportunity over time to talk. We've had to walk with guys. One of our kids got shot a couple years ago. We had to go into the mosque to the funeral. We've had to help try to bail some kids out of issues where they fit the description. So it gave us life common ground with them. We're in their school. Our sports program is the sports program for the school because the city won't fund this school sport program. So our church uses that as a common ground opportunity. We bought the school dictionaries. Because the library is not funded, they have maybe 2 full shelves of books for the kids at this particular school.
Eric, do you see them zeros?
Oh, my bad. My bad. So but just common ground experiences.
It's still gonna jump us any minute.
I know it's
any
all good.
minute.
Common ground experiences I think are important that give you an environment where you don't feel like you're starting from scratch every time you talk to someone.
Yeah. And this can continue. Brother's gonna be around. If you wanna, pick their brain some more, chop it up some more, they'll be around. Thank these guys for sharing with us.